Hello and welcome to another edition of the Skillwork Forum. As a reminder, this podcast exists to help leaders and companies who are looking for solutions to overcome the skilled labor shortage in America, but more relevant to today, just looking for insights and maybe recommendations on how to persevere and lead your company through the current COVID-19 pandemic that we're all working through. As a reminder, I'm Tim, and I'm joined with my partner, Brett from Skillwork. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can get back to work, how we can reopen the country, reopen our businesses, and how we balance the needs of our business and our customers, as well as our employees, as we try to implement a safe and practical return to work. So it's all around. We can see that this pent-up desire to get back to work, I'm hearing it now being coined as Responsibly Reopening America. And Brett, I was traveling and I'm traveling right now, and everywhere you go, you can just see that there's businesses beginning to open, but there's just a pent-up desire for people to get back to work. But it's happening really one business at a time, one locale at a time. Each are unique, each have their own challenges. One thing is certain, we got to get things back up and running quick. It's statistics are really staggering. There's hundreds of thousands of businesses across the country that are severely impacted. I just read something this morning that the Restaurant Association, it's a restaurant owners group, is estimating that 15 to 20% of restaurants are not going to make it back, and that every day that they stay out of business continues to escalate that statistic. So unemployment is very sobering as well. We started this thing out in March. We were about 4.4%, essentially fully employed. And by the end of this week, I'm hearing projections upwards. What are we hearing, Brett? Like 20, 23%, something like that?
Yeah, 2023, 30 million people out of work. So crazy numbers.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, we can't sustain this. We have to get our economy going, got to get back to work. But what's the best way? How do you do this? How do you, as a business owner, balance the needs of your business, your customers, your employees, stay within the confines of what we're being told, of both the recommendations and, in fact, the requirements? So there's a lot that's going on there, and a lot of decisions have to be made. So there are some guidelines out there, though, right, Brett?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, this isn't just kind of a flip the switch and go. And to your point, Tim, I mean, there's no matter what you think, wherever you land on your politics, it doesn't really matter in something like this. It's more about there's a lot of guidance, and the guidance may not be perfect, but I can assure you, or I believe, I shouldn't say I can assure you, I believe they probably have more knowledge and more data than we do as individuals. So I think the guidance is relevant. I think it's something that we should lean into. We've all become experts on the CDC and getting to their website and understanding their what they're telling us, and I think it's very, very relevant. So it really starts at the highest level. Obviously at the federal level, and the guidelines that they're providing through these phases and the CDC and so forth. And then it's really coming down then to the governors, as we live in a big country and a very, beautiful, unique country with lots of different states and stuff. So obviously you can't treat it all the same. And then ultimately it really comes down even further, from a state by state to then a city by city, county by county. And then ultimately, it comes down to us. It comes down to leaders inside of those guidelines. Then we have to make decisions of how we are going to open our businesses and what we feel most comfortable with. I know our offices are based here in Omaha, Nebraska, and they've given the ability for restaurants to begin to reopen here with guidelines, but some restaurants haven't reopened yet, even though they can, because they're still they're making that assessment, they're getting their people back to work, they're figuring it out. So it's I think that's where we have to step up as leaders and decide how to go forward. So.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I traveled this past weekend. It was a very unique experience. Having been a business traveler for years, I haven't experienced anything like this in many, many years, but the plane was very sparsely um, uh, populated, not very many people. I had a row to myself, I think on purpose, the way they're doing it. And the airports were not very crowded at all. And then the city where I'm in right now, even though the state is pretty wide open, this city has chosen to be much more locked down. So it's challenging to get basic necessities and things like that without jumping through a few hurdles. So it is difficult, but it can be done. And many of us are getting back to work. I know, Brett, you and I, our company this week, we started phasing in a return to work back to our office. And maybe some of the things that we've walked through and we've been learning, we might be able to share to help other companies as they're walking through this, maybe give you an idea or two about what to do in terms of getting your company back to work. So, like anything else in business, putting a plan together, thinking about what you're going to do, what are going to be the protocols, communicating really openly with your staff, making sure they know what the plan is, getting their feedback, and then kind of do a phased approach to start. It's I don't think it's a flip the switch and everybody goes back to the way they were in February or March. It's going to be a phased approach. So we've got a few things that maybe we can talk about here, Brett, with respect to what we've been doing, and maybe it might help some people out there as they're thinking through these steps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest thing, and it's really been, I think, the case really from the beginning of all of this when it became a reality. Tim, I remember sending you a note, or you sent me a note on a Sunday, and I think we both went, "Hey, this is real. This is not going away." And we made a decision then to take our office remote and that type of thing. And now we're kind of coming back the other. But to your point, throughout this, it's really been about communication. I think as leaders, if we kind of like the old ad, wipe off the dirt, let's go, kind of a thing. It's not really fitting for this time. I think you got to be you got to listen really well to your people. You've got to understand whether you're there or not there is a level of fear, and it's going to take a little time. One of my sons a few years ago at a very young age, had to get a pacemaker of all things. And he's great now. He's done great. But after he got that pacemaker, they said it would take him a year to he would have these episodes, and they put the pacemaker in so he wouldn't have these pass out episodes. But they said it would take him, even though he was fine, it would take him a year before he would be able to not mentally have a fear of that. And it was so true. It was, he had to have a belief. And I think I share that just to basically say, I think it's kind of where we are now. People are coming back to work. And so you got to be very sensitive to the way they feel. Don't be like, oh, come on, suck it up. Let's go. It's not a big deal. So, what's your thoughts, Tim?
Yeah, Brett, to your point, I think that there is a need to balance concern, and everybody has their own level of risk threshold depending on what they've heard, what they've influenced, and even real viable underlying conditions, and either personally or with people in their families. So it's really incumbent upon us as leaders to be sensitive to our folks and try to balance that. The need to get the work going, the need to get the company back up with the fear that's there, the uncertainty that's there, and gradually over time bring people back into work. So for us, And practically speaking, what that's looked like this week was our return to work week. We've been marking this week for several weeks now that we said, hey, this is our target. This is when we're returning, and communicating that. We had a plan in place. We talked about what the physical environment would be like, and actually splitting up our organization. So every other day, half would be in there for the first 2 weeks, and we'll see how that goes. And the other half are working virtually. And even then, we gave people the opportunity to, to work virtually if they felt like that there was anything at all in the back of their mind that would prevent them from coming. So you have to trust your people a little bit during this time, and then as you're moving forward, kind of push a little bit when appropriate, but not too hard, Brett.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, you're exactly right. It's like I said. I mean, listening to your workforce right now is probably as critical as any time. You can almost read body language and see if somebody feels a little bit, uncomfortable. We've taken steps, in our office. Fortunately, we've got a fair amount of space that allows us to kind of be able to spread people out. So I mean, we've moved desk inside of cubes, into a separate area so that people, weren't as close to each other. We had some people that shared offices where we're either, like you're saying, Tim, we're either having them, flip-flop days, or in some cases, they've moved their desk into another area. So I think all things, and if somebody wants to, wear a mask in the office, I don't think, it's not a time to be a bully or shame people. And
Yeah, for sure.
so, it's just, everybody's got to feel comfortable to do, what they need to do to be comfortable. So,
Yeah, I was thinking, Brett, as you said that, maybe one of these conversations coming up, we could invite one of our attorneys on the podcast here to talk about, what are some of the liabilities that because I could just see, downstream we're a very litigious society. So you're a business out there, you're bringing people back to work, and one of your employees doesn't feel ready to come back, and somehow they feel forced to come back, and next thing you know, you've got a complaint lodged against you for forcing somebody under these conditions. So there's a lot to think about. So I think you really need to be uh, a right balance of pressing ahead and leading the organization through a lot of fear and uncertainty, and then being very ultra sensitive. So, and we're talking about our organization. We've got obviously our headquarters. It's an office type environment, but our business is really the core of our business are skill workers out in the field at our clients' locations in manufacturing facilities, construction, transportation, and many of them are facing much more different environments than we have here. So it's not a one size fits all, is it?
no, not at all, not at all. And I think you're right. I mean, whether that's, whether you're in an office or whether you're in a manufacturing construction site, there's no, hard and fast um, rules or guidelines from the CDC. But obviously, I think what a lot of us are starting to recognize, as we've continued through this process, is that while uh, me personally, I may not have a lot of fear. I'm a relatively healthy person. As age goes, I guess, somewhat young, and so
Compared
don't
to,
have.
say, me, for example.
Yeah. So, but I do think that, protecting the vulnerable is really, I think, in this next season of the COVID-19, as we begin to reopen, you hear this at all levels. It really is about protecting the vulnerable. My dad is 80 years old. I don't want my dad to get this. He's just not. He's in that vulnerable. So we don't want to see that with that group. But so I think a lot of places too, you've got to look at. We've got a couple people in our office. We're telling them to be do where you feel comfortable. We've got one gentleman who's had some issues with his lungs at a younger age. We said, hey, you do what is best for you and what your doctor is saying. We've got a young lady in our office that is pregnant, and we're telling her the same thing. And as she gets closer to that time, to maybe be even more cautious, but to do what their doctors are suggesting. We know, Tim, as you indicated, I know some of these larger facilities, manufacturing, even some of the essential, obviously there's a lot reported on the news of a lot of the outbreaks in these different manufacturing facilities, which is challenging, but a lot of them are making the decision to really protect anybody in their workforce that is either over the age of 65 or in some cases even over the age of 60. And so, these again are all things that I think, as leaders of companies, you've got to, you got to be a little more flexible and think about it and kind of make the best decisions that we can. So.
Yeah, you mentioned your dad, Brett, and it's without getting into a lot of detail. This reason I've traveled, I wouldn't travel for normal business reasons. I've got a 81-year-old dad, and he and my mom he's getting a procedure in a hospital, so he's in a hospital just coming out of surgery, and I mean it's a strange world because you can't get. I mean, they got like Fort Knox, the hospital, you can't get in, so he can have no visitors. So we're very concerned about, I'm concerned about being around my mom who's 80, and so it's more about being considerate and thinking about others, and not only those you care about, but even the people on the front lines at the hospitals and even our grocery stores. I was in a grocery store yesterday, and those people there are working and they're interacting with hundreds of people all day, and I just can't help but think they're heroic if some of the actions are taken. I don't think that's an overstatement, and so the rest of us, as we're getting back to normal, getting back to our businesses, it's as we mentioned last week on our podcast. It's the next normal, so there are going to be some changes, but maybe some practical things you can think about. We've mentioned several of them, but as you and your company are getting back to work, maybe Brett and I can share you a couple of things. And you've already mentioned, Brett, hey, protect your older workers, be very sensitive to them. It appears that those that have underlying health conditions or the elderly are at much higher risk. So it's not a one size fits all. So take a look at your workforce. And again, the labor laws, we've all gotten so highly sensitized to anything approaching, addressing anybody's age or medical condition. But in this case, it's necessary to do that. So you got to kind of probe that and understand that a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, for totally different purposes. I mean, obviously, again, seek legal or speak with your HR. But in this case, you're looking to obviously protect people, not to use that their age or their underlying health. But obviously, they still have they've got to share that. I mean, obviously. But I think people are open to it. They understand that. And companies, the vast majority of companies that we interact with are definitely doing the right thing. They're doing the right thing and taking care of those people and protecting them. And anytime we have a crisis like this, whether it was back in the 9/11 days or whatever, it's always amazing here that people and companies tend to, the vast majority, we hear about the bad ones, but the vast majority do the right thing and are doing the right thing to protect their people.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, in wrapping things up here, is, go to some of those websites, your local, health officials. Yeah, most states, governors, mayors have directives out there, but stay tuned to those updates. That every day we're making improvements across the country on testing, treatment, support. So stay tuned to that. Look for things that you can put in place in your business, whether it be just, checking people's temperature as they come in, making sure anybody with any symptoms stays home. Be aware of some of the privacy guidelines relating to the people's medical and personal issues, but these are different times. And, if you're motivated the correct way, I'm sure that there are smart ways to put some of these guidelines into place. And again, the infection hasn't gone away. So you could be dealing with people in your workforce that do get infected. So think about what you would do in the event that that happened, and maybe some of the things you put in place to work virtually and remotely might be beneficial in the event that you have some kind of situation with one of your employees, even in the next few weeks or months. So, any final thoughts before we wrap up, Brett?
No, just like I said, obviously, we're all in. We know we got to get back to work. We got to do it in a safe manner. We know that there's going to be a level of fear. Be sensitive to how people are handling things, and clearly, work extra hard to protect the vulnerable, and do the extra things. Move the desk 6 feet away if that's what makes another person feel comfortable. Obviously wipe down your offices. Clean your offices more consistently for a season if that's what's required. As you know, Tim, we say it all the time. We will get through this. There will be a next normal that's coming at us. Our goal, of course, is to grow in every season, and so we're not looking to just truly not just get this behind us, but to be a better, stronger company and a better leader coming out the other side of it.
Right. Yeah. And again, we lean heavily on our faith, and I'm thinking of a proverb many of us are familiar with, and it's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It's trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. So we're trusting him, and hopefully today this podcast gave you some things to think about on both a personal and professional level. I want to thank you for joining us on the Skillwork Forum. If you're looking for more information on how we might help your company overcome the skilled labor shortage in America, or anything that you've heard along the lines of leadership or support, we're always happy to help. Please visit us at our website, skillwork.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks very much.